area of expertise intersect with data science?
Data science needs data.
Yeah.
And that data needs to be cleansed. That data needs to be in a particular format. People need to know how to deal with that and make it perform well. Everything I do is really related to what eventually makes it into data science. So I don't think it changes much at all, except being able to leverage tools much better to analyze that data. But as far as being able to provide the data and make it perform well, I don't think that's all that different. I mean,
I can pop this as well to the group. Same question in a different way. A data scientist should be approaching you, each one of you, if you manage any kind of a system, and saying, what's in that system? How much data is missing? How do I get access to it? What do you store? How authoritative do you think it is? Has anyone ever done that? Has anybody identifying themselves as a data scientist ever come in and said, tell me about your database? You've had that happen?
Yes, and I do that to other people.
And you also ask as well. And that's a failure of the data scientist. That is an abject failure of the data scientist not to go find out, because the number one thing you have to do is find your data sources. And if they're not approaching you and saying, Kimberly, can you trust this data? That's an odd question.
No, it's not an odd question, because I see so many environments where they don't think you need data integrity because they do it in the application. I mean, it drives me absolutely bonkers. And I have gone to environments where they didn't put anything into their back-end server and their business rules on the back-end server because everything's done in the client. And then we start finding all sorts of problems with the data integrity. And so when it comes to data science, if I've done my job correctly, then I should have better, more accessible data indexed for the types of queries that would feed into what eventually goes into the algorithms that data science can even better analyze that data.
It's a perfect answer. And the reason is that if you're in data science, if I look at a report and I just make a quick chart, I can bury bad data in that and it really doesn't affect a whole lot at that point. However, when I begin to do predictive or descriptive analytics, and I'm doing some of these formulas, the very small data changes that are wrong, those perturbations reverberate throughout the entire prediction and can make wildly different assumptions. These algorithms think like humans.
The butterfly effect.
It's a butterfly effect. It really is. And so Kimberly's nailed it. If she's made sure that she's got good, clean data, as I said this morning in the session, clean data is the lifeblood of analytics. It always has been, and it always will be.
You said something interesting. You said if data scientists have approached us, it's the data scientist's fault. I would say most companies don't have a data scientist and don't know they need one.
Correct.
And so if the DBAs aren't savvy enough to realize that somebody should be asking them, then the company's kind of screwed.
Yeah. But even if they don't have a data scientist, there's some type of analyst in most companies, even if it's just some of the C-level employees.
Right, but they must be thinking about our processes correct, rather than is our data valid.
Yeah. Right. I had an interesting event where I was analyzing some data that came from machinery, and it was measuring temperature, and I got the data and it was sent to me as a series, and the way that it particularly worked, it made sense to use a continuous variable in my formula because it looked continuous. And all my predictions were coming out wrong. As I began to bin them, as I began to separate them out, I noticed that half the predictions were really good, the other half were rubbish. And what I found was this. I had to drive all the way back to the machine that was reporting the data into a SQL Server database. And I asked them, I see here this data is being reported every 60 seconds. Yes. This is interesting to me because as I'm looking at this, it's just not making sense. But what I found out was this. Half of the machines were new. And they both sampled and recorded their data every 60 seconds. The other machines were old, and so the DBA merely turned it on to report the same data every 60 seconds. So it would report data every 60 seconds, then an hour later it would stair-step up, making it a discrete variable, not a continuous variable. And so I had to change. So all the way back to where the data was coming from, if I'd have asked the DBA, I'd have known that.
And I think communication is one of these things that's important for everything, especially when it comes to data. So I had one DBA that was looking for 5 years worth of hospital data for a particular hospital.
Right.
They couldn't find it. And then they went, I said, well, let's go and ask the business. because obviously that's serious. And then the business said, no, actually, that's fine, because that hospital closed for 5 years for refurbishment. The data was merged with a nearby hospital, so the data isn't missing, it's actually correct. So sometimes that communication just saves a lot of trouble, because we were deeply concerned about missing data, but actually it was very easily resolved, and then it came to separating the data out again, which was a separate issue. So sometimes, I think, I've been in situations where one person will come in the room, and then someone else will come in, and the first person will leave because the first person's come in the room. Sometimes data is that contentious in an organisation, because if you have the data, you have the knowledge, knowledge is power, and power is control. So I think the communication and facilitating that is so important, which is why the team data science process is really critical. If you're not using it, please have a look at it.
It is available on the web, so look at that. Great stuff. Did we get your question?
Yep, thank you.
Great, let's move on. I think we